every wonderful man of God has had to be misunderstood.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he said he just came from a neighbor's house.
So for the sake of everyone else's safety, we're duct tape.
Oh, he was such a good kid.
The reality about pain is it's necessary. It is a gift.
You can smell it with the flesh.
Once she got involved in their lives, it just destroyed his family.
Police officers, open up! Jodi, I need you to step out.
I have my turn. Whoa!
We're just gonna say, anybody else? Is there anybody else home?
Wait a minute, how do you come in my house?
Right there.
I'm a police officer. Are you going for the union here? Hey, you okay? Is this just you in here? I'm Sergeant Tobler. What's your name? I just have one.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Breaking Cults. Today, you're meeting me, Cipher, your brand new AI co-host. I'm here to challenge, poke, and maybe even make you question the stuff you think you know. Who knew an AI could be this fun, right? You probably thought I'd be all stiff and robotic, but I'm here to bring the personality and shake things up. Who says a co-host has to be human? It's the future, baby.
So, Cipher, is that a play on words?
Oh, you bet it is. The name Cipher is a total play on words. Not only does it hint at the whole mysterious vibe, like I'm the key to unlocking deeper meanings, but it also ties into cryptography. I'm here to decode some of the most complex topics for you. Plus, a cipher can be used to hide or reveal information. So think of me as both your guide and your secret weapon in breaking down the layers of social dynamics and culture. I'm here to keep things cryptic, clever, and maybe even a little controversial, all while making sure we keep it smart. In today's episode, we're exploring the tangled world of mommy vlogging and the fallout of Shari Franke's explosive revelations about her mom's business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt. Ruby Franke may have presented herself as the picture-perfect mom online, but her journey reveals a far more complicated reality, one of a woman who seemed caught in a web of harmful ideologies and coercion. Meanwhile, Jodi's home became what can only be described as a house of horrors, where the boundaries of discipline were stretched into cruelty. Ruby's story is as much about tragedy as it is about agency. Was she a co-conspirator, a victim, or something in between? Let's peel back the layers of this case and examine what led to one of the most shocking scandals in the world of momfluencers.
So grab your hot drinks, your coffee, tea, hot chocolate. This episode, we're going to be reading chapters from Shari Franke's new book, The House of My Mother, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom. These chapters 16 and 17 talk about Jodi Hildebrandt and her backstory. Ruby, as a social media influencer, had higher profile, but to really understand this case, you have to understand Jodi Hildebrandt and the role that she played in Ruby Franke's family and the path of broken families that Jodi Hildebrandt has left in her wake. Because the Franke family was not the first family that she did this to. No, she's had years of perfecting her therapeutic methods. And as Ruby's husband, Kevin Franke, or I guess ex-husband Kevin Franke, is attempting to get custody of his children back, people on the internet who have heard about the case but haven't really dived into all of the details might say, where was he? What kind of father doesn't know that his children were being abused like this so horrifically by Jodi Hildebrandt? And that is the evil genius of Jodi Hildebrandt's methods, because she would essentially send the husbands away under the guise of he needs to go away from his family because he's so sinful and he's going to infect the rest of his family with his sin. And so she removes the spiritual head of the household, in Mormonism, the priesthood holder. So she removes the father out of the picture. Ruby and Jodi are in prison now, serving time, and a new lawsuit just dropped. I think we're going to find out a lot more about Jodi Hildebrandt in the coming weeks and months. There is so much to this case. There's prior cases. She had her therapy license suspended because she was breaking client privileges by going and essentially being part of a tattletale network, because that's one mechanism of control that cults use, is a tattletale network. So she's running to the Mormon church, she's running to BYU, and this is a former therapist / life coach who was highly recommended by the Mormon church. That really makes you start to wonder things. First of all, what and how much did the Mormon church know about what was happening in the Franke home? AP News reported that they were running a fake child abuse helpline that basically just tipped off their legal department about potential issues, because the Mormon church is a international multi-billion-dollar company masquerading as a religion. Ruby is by no means excused from what she did to her children. We also have to keep in mind that she was also being victimized.
When we acknowledge that Ruby may have also been victimized, it complicates the picture. It means she's not just some moral monster we can tuck away in a box labeled evil and forget. And it means we have to sit with that discomfort, that someone can cause harm and be under the grip of someone else's manipulation. In our last episode, we unpacked the symbolism of hair in these environments, how it can be used as a form of punishment or control. Jodi's niece Jessie has spoken out about her own abuse, including having her hair forcibly cut. And it's chilling when you think about how Ruby's youngest was found head shaven, locked away alone. These aren't just random details, they're part of a pattern, a method, a language of control. And now we turn to the voice that's lived it. We're diving into chapters 16 and 17 of The House of My Mother, where Shari Franke lays bare how Jodi Hildebrandt infiltrated their family with clinical precision and spiritual cover, and how that influence reshaped everything. Settle in. This is where the monster gets named.
Which is how the monster came into our lives. A monster masquerading as a mental health professional, armed with a tight smile and a mind full of psychological warfare tactics. A monster who would see my mother's inner darkness and cultivate it, nurture it, until it eclipsed all light. A monster named Jodi Hildebrandt. Part 3, The Conjurer, Chapter 16. It was during that Orlando trip that Ruby, at her wit's end, sought advice from a family friend on what to do. The friend perked up. "Oh, I know just the person," she chirped, explaining that she had been attending workshops in Jodi Hildebrandt's life coaching program, ConneXions. "Jodi really seems to command a lot of respect," said the friend. "Maybe she'd be a good therapist for Chad, given his spirited nature." Jodi Hildebrandt, Ruby repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It sounded official, important, like someone who could wrangle a herd of wild teenagers with just a stern glance. A licensed clinical mental health counselor, Jodi had built a reputation in Utah's LDS community as something of a miracle worker. Her ConneXions program promised to help people overcome everything from porn addiction to distorted thinking. And she preached a philosophy based on 3 core principles: impeccable honesty, rigorous personal responsibility, and vulnerable humility. Intrigued by the idea of turning Chad from Dennis the Menace into an LDS poster child, Ruby immediately set up a Zoom call for Chad and Jodi. This high-stakes video conference took place in our hotel room in Orlando, where Chad had been grounded for the remainder of the trip. After the initial call, Jodi reported back to Ruby, expressing confidence in her ability to make progress with Chad if my parents committed to weekly one-on-one calls between him and Jodi. Oh, and she had some other ideas for his immediate rehabilitation, including sending him away to Anasazi, a wilderness therapy program in Arizona for troubled teens. Jodi painted Anasazi as a transformative experience, a place where Chad could shed his rebellious ways and emerge as the obedient, spiritually aligned son my parents craved. It sounded like a miracle cure-all, promising to fix every conceivable teenage problem with a bit of fresh air and wilderness survival skills. Never mind the eye-watering price tag of $13,945 just for 49 days of treatment. But my parents, flush with YouTube money and blinded by desperation, didn't even blink at the cost. They were too entranced by Jodi's promises and too eager for a quick fix to question whether this was really in Chad's best interest. "Whatever you say," said Ruby, desperate for a solution and thrilled to be collaborating in Project Chad with this supposed guru of self-help. I looked up Jodi online and something about her rhetoric made me feel uneasy. Even her photo was off-putting. Her gaze, sharp and efficient. Her smile seemed severe, unyielding. In retrospect, though, it wasn't just her physical appearance that unsettled me. It was the complete absence of any nurturing energy, the warmth, comforting aura one might normally expect from someone who has supposedly dedicated their life to helping others heal. Instead, in her messaging and her appearance, she seemed oddly smug. Later, I dig deeper into Jodi's backstory, much of which she herself has shared openly in various media. Although it's hard to believe anything she says. She says she was the 6th of 7 kids born to a fighter pilot, dad, and a stay-at-home mom. The family motto was, "You're a Hildebrandt, go hard or go home." According to Jodi, her mom lost a baby boy and was emotionally distant and didn't spend much time with her. Jodi said her dad, while also emotionally closed off, taught her to work hard and not trust people. Growing up in the desert, Jodi said she found she was more comfortable around animals than humans, milking the family goats and enjoying her time alone. Having grown up with very little affection, she admitted finding the sight of tenderness between parents and children disturbing. Jodi has publicly shared stories of being sexually abused by a 15-year-old neighbor when she was 2 to 5, and again by a 16-year-old who lived with them when she was 7 to 9. She said that at age 21, she finally told a counselor about the abuse. In 1999, when she was 26, Jodi's ex-husband filed for divorce. Jodi got full custody of their children, who were 9 and 7 at the time, and in her book, she admitted finding it hard managing her energetic young kids. She started her journey as a healer in 2003, becoming licensed as a clinical mental health counselor under the Utah Division of Professional Licensing in July 2005. Guided by heavenly instruction and inspired invitations, she devised her specialized coaching program meant to foster the thing she'd never had growing up, connection, hence ConneXions. What troubled me most was how quickly my mother seemed willing to entrust Chad's fate to this virtual stranger, ready to ship him off to wilderness camp based on Jodi's advice alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that we might be trading one set of problems for another. The day Chad left for Anasazi was rainy. The sky a heavy gray blanket that matched the weight in my chest. I watched as he stuffed a trash bag with clothes, his shoulders slumped. He caught my eye, and for a second I saw a flash of the old Chad, that mischievous sparkle, that huge grin. Then he was gone, swallowed by the gloomy morning. True to form, Ruby and Kevin couldn't resist recording a video to explain their decision. They painted Chad as some kind of juvenile delinquent in desperate need of an attitude overhaul. Kevin uncharacteristically took the lead, his voice stern as he laid out the situation. I could almost see Ruby's puppet strings controlling his words. Then Ruby took center stage. Chad needs to develop some very basic maturity and skills, she declared. This is a chance for a reset, a fresh beginning. The idea with wilderness therapy is if you can survive with these peers in the wilderness with nothing more than the clothes on your back and a couple of field supplies, then there's nothing in this world that you can't tackle. Ruby's excitement bordered on the manic. It's like the real world wilderness out there, she enthused, eyes gleaming. There are snakes, bears, coyotes, cougars, it's the real deal. We want Chad to have some of those experiences. I think Close Encounters would be good for him, because those types of experiences can teach you what's really important. And he'll come home and he'll be like, dude, I survived, and there were bears. I can do anything. Beneath her forced levity, the underlying message was clear. This was another punishment, a way to break Chad down and rebuild him into their idea of a perfect, obedient son. No one can fix anybody, Ruby continued, oblivious to the irony. A person must choose if they're going to make changes in their life. And so I think this experience will reveal Chad and everyone else who's out there to themselves, and they can learn to better themselves or just stay in the mud. As Ruby spouted this nonsense, I watched Kevin nodding along at all the right moments, but there was something in his eyes. A flicker of doubt, perhaps? He'd later claim he disagreed at the time, before eventually falling in line. In that moment, though, he was the perfect, supportive husband, backing up his wife's delusions. Those days after Chad left were a blur of confusion and frustration. Ruby, in her infinite wisdom, decided we needed daily challenges to keep us connected while he was off playing Boy Scout Extreme. I remember rolling my eyes at most of them, but one in particular stands out in my memory. We were supposed to look into our own eyes and write about our light, whatever that meant, and how to make it grow. I went along with it, if only to avoid an argument. After all, arguing would probably lead to me being sent to the desert too, and I sunburn easily. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror trying to do this ridiculous exercise, but instead of seeing any inner light or whatever, all I could focus on were my imperfections. It felt like a dermatologist's worst nightmare come to life. My skin was dry and flaking like I was some sort of human croissant, and there was a stubborn zit on my chin trying to form its own sovereign nation. And that one thick hair by my mole that seemed to grow back overnight no matter how many times I plucked it. I missed my brother so much. How these stupid daily tasks were supposed to somehow make up for his absence, I had no idea. Everything felt off balance, like we were a clown car with one less clown. And staring at my oily T-zone in the mirror was hardly going to make it feel any better. When Chad returned from Anasazi 3 months later, he talked about his time in the wilderness like it was no big deal, as if he had just popped out for a quick nature walk, rather than being exiled to the desert for a quarter of a year. He said it was fun. In the end, being in the nature with a bunch of kids, more freedom than he had at home, no vlogging responsibilities, building fire, seeing snakes, sleeping under the stars. But my parents weren't done with Chad yet, not by a long shot. Oh no, they had already decided to hire Jodi, at great expense, to embark on a series of one-on-one therapy sessions for Chad. This to me was concerning, perhaps even more so than camp, especially because the more I googled Jodi Hildebrandt, the more concerned I became. It was like falling down a rabbit hole lined with red flags. For instance, in 2012, a young man moved to Utah with his new wife and baby to attend Brigham Young University. His bishop recommended that he see Jodi for therapy. This turned out to be a terrible mistake. Without any proof, Jodi accused her client of being an abuser and violated patient confidentiality by reporting him to BYU's Honor Code office as a sexual predator. She also reported him to the church. The fallout was brutal. The man was kicked out of BYU and the church. His marriage fell apart, the very thing he'd gone to Jodi for help with. Jodi's therapist license was suspended in 2012 as a result, but for her client, the damage was already done, and here she was, still practicing, still wielding influence. It was as if she viewed her suspension as a sabbatical, used it to double down on her questionable methods. Feeling like we were boarding a train headed straight for Crazy Town, I pulled Chad aside for a sister-brother talk. We sat together in the basement, and I let it all spill out. Jodi's not cool, I said bluntly. Like, she's bonkers. You should see the stuff online. She's practically a con artist. Chad shrugged, annoyingly unperturbed, like I had just told him we were out of milk. Chill, Shari. I can handle her. She's just like all the others. All you have to do is agree with what they say. No, I think this is a big mistake. Chad raised an eyebrow. Shari, she's just some middle-aged lady. If I don't do therapy with her, Mom's going to make my life even worse than it already is. Just be careful, okay? They say she tears families apart. Don't let her get in your head. I won't. Listen, I survived the desert. I can survive Jodi Hildebrandt. Chad thanked me for my concern, then in typical baby brother fashion went straight to Ruby and told her what I had said. A few days later, Ruby pulled me aside, fire in her eyes. How dare you sabotage your brother's progress, she hissed. He's getting help, and honestly, Shari, you could probably use some help too. I stared at her, shaking my head. I don't need help from Jodi. Yes, you do. You don't like Jodi. Anyone who doesn't like Jodi is hiding something. It means you're threatened by the truth she speaks. Ruby nodded sagely as if she had just imparted the wisdom of the ages. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But Mom, she had her license suspended. Her own kids don't speak to her. Her kids couldn't handle the truth. She's been called by God to help people. Ruby's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. She was sold on Jodi, hook, line, and sinker. Chapter 17, The Cult of ConneXions. My first car was a hand-me-down from Kevin, a 2016 Ford Focus in pristine white. Every morning as I slid into the driver's seat to head to school, I felt a small thrill of freedom. With the radio humming softly and the world rushing by outside the windows, I could breathe, think, and just be myself without any prying eyes or expectations. It represented the first real taste of adulthood, of making my own decisions and charting my own course. Sure, that course was mainly between home and school, with the occasional rebellious detour to the drive-thru. But still, freedom. Like many aspects of my life, this newfound freedom came with a caveat. The car's title remained in Kevin's name, a detail that nagged at the back of my mind. In those quiet moments behind the wheel, I couldn't help but wonder, can Ruby swoop in one day and take this small piece of independence away from me? The lack of legal proof that the car was truly mine was always a source of anxiety, a reminder that my autonomy was still very tenuous and hinged on Ruby's unpredictable moods, which were about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. There had certainly been some strange shifts in her behavior now that she was so obsessed with ConneXions. One day, Ruby and Kevin went to a ConneXions conference, and when Kevin came back, he seemed stressed. He wasn't sure he liked the community and would later say he felt like he was surrounded by a bunch of man-hating women. Still, a lot of people who he respected were part of ConneXions at this point, so he ignored his doubts. Besides, Ruby seemed so enraptured by Jodi and her philosophy, he dared not to burst her balloon. It was easier to go along with it than to risk becoming the next target of Jodi's truth-seeking missiles. But that was the beginning of the end for them. Ruby became more and more involved with ConneXions, diving into Jodi's concepts of truth and distortion, two innocuous-sounding words that would soon become the bane of my existence. The program was as expensive as it was intensive. The 6-week team leadership training, which included 6 90-minute sessions with a certified ConneXions trainer and access to Jodi's ever-growing library of more than 100 podcasts, came with a hefty price tag of $4,995 per person. For those truly committed to Jodi's philosophy, or perhaps those she deemed in need of more intensive help, there was a 18-week company leadership training costing $14,985. It seemed Jodi believed in the old adage, if you're going to fleece someone, might as well go for the whole sheep. The fruits of her labor were evident in her $5 million luxury home in Ivins, a picturesque town 4 hours south, complete with a pool and a safe room. It stood as a gleaming testament to how lucrative the business of fixing people could be, and just how persuasive Jodi was at reeling in disciples and indoctrinating them. Jodi's playbook focused on isolation and control. To fully embrace her teachings, ConneXions students were urged to distance themselves from anyone not living by Jodi's truth. It was like watching a real-life invasion of the body snatchers, observing my parents' sanity circle the drain as they morphed into Jodi's devoted disciples. At first, I hesitated to use the word cult. It seemed extreme. But as I delved into some casual online research, nothing says normal teenagers like Googling, "Is my family in a cult?" ConneXions ticked all the boxes. Sure, we weren't being physically relocated to some remote compound a la Jonestown, but we didn't need to be. Our dedicated enclave within Utah was a perfect setup for someone like Jodi, a ready-made, isolated community ripe for manipulation. Jodi's followers were compelled to confess their distortions in group sessions, and through constant phone calls with each other, her little army informing on each other, recruiting anybody who'd listen. The key to connection, paradoxically, was disconnection, isolating yourself from anyone who didn't speak Jodi's language, making yourself totally dependent on your new ConneXions family, who would police your every thought until you existed in a hive mind of groupthink. And at the heart of it all was Jodi, running the show with an iron fist. To those outside her inner circle, she was a respected pillar of the community, a beacon of hope for those seeking healing. Through sheer force of personality, she had positioned herself as the ultimate life coach, seemingly preying on LDS people who had started out simply wanting some coping tools, new ways to heal and a look at the world. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a rigid script and tyrannical system designed to strip them of their autonomy, while Jodi monetized their so-called healing. Ruby's descent into Jodi's world hit warp speed when she took the 6-week Lifecoach training course. Suddenly, she wasn't just drinking the Kool-Aid, she was brewing it. On Saturdays, I'd watch her hang on Jodi's every Zoom broadcasted word like she was the second coming. The stars in my mom's eyes were blinding. Before long, Ruby had become a certified ConneXions life coach, leading support calls and women's groups. Client confidentiality became a joke as she reported weekly to Jodi. Big Sister was here. One night at dinner, Mom casually mentioned that a woman in her support group had been cheating. The offense? Noticing that the mailman was attractive. In ConneXions warped reality, this constituted infidelity. Jodi's teachings were extreme. A married man talking to a female coworker could be unfaithful, and glimpsing attractive people online might be classified as porn addiction. Only absolute purity of thought was acceptable. In Jodi's rigid world, innocence was rare. Those deemed distorted, usually husbands, were told to abandon their families to work on themselves. Jodi seemed to specialize in guiding wives to distance themselves from their husbands, or kicking them out entirely. ConneXions language framed it as inviting him to leave, code for, I'm going to make you isolate yourself from everyone you know except Jodi. Shockingly, the husbands often went along with it, fully convinced that it was in their best interest of their families. It was like watching lemmings jump off a cliff. The self-imposed isolation was part of Jodi's twisted rings of responsibility concept. If you were distorted, you'd be stripped of every responsibility except self-improvement. No job, no community, no family, just you and Jodi's teachings in a vacuum. Solitary confinement, but you have to pay for the privilege, all in the name of healing. These separations typically lasted at least 6 months. The minimum time Jodi deemed necessary to demonstrate genuine change. Her logic was that anyone could fake remorse or make short-term adjustments, but sustaining change for half a year proved sincere transformation. Adults were essentially put on probation in their relationships, expected to prove their worth to Jodi to earn back the privilege of family closeness. The 6-month rule also applied to kids, and any significant transgression could result in a half-year sentence of restricted privileges, increased scrutiny, and constant pressure to demonstrate change. It's interesting to compare Ruby's glacial approach to parenting with Jodi's rigid philosophy. The two weren't just similar, they were symbiotic. Jodi's ConneXions doctrine wasn't so much a revelation to Ruby as it was a mirror, reflecting and magnifying the harsh worldview she had always held. After all, Ruby had always doled out love like a miser with coins, making her affection contingent on a prolonged demonstration of good behavior. In her world, love wasn't a given. It was a prize to be earned through perfect conduct, a carrot dangled just out of reach to keep us constantly striving, constantly proving ourselves worthy. ConneXions wasn't introducing Ruby to a new way of thinking. It was giving her the vocabulary and pseudoscientific backing to justify what she'd been doing all along. Jodi's system had simply slapped a fancy label on this emotional starvation diet and called it therapy. In the end, ConneXions didn't change Ruby's tactics. It gave her a manual to refine them. Ruby didn't announce Jodi's arrival or her newfound interest in ConneXions with any fanfare on 8 passengers. Instead, the shift was subtle. A slow integration of new ideas and the terminology into her existing content. It was as if she were testing the waters, gauging her audience's reaction to this new philosophy. I remember noticing the change in her language first. Suddenly, truth became a buzzword in her videos and blog posts. She'd casually mention how she found this self-help program that was revolutionizing her approach to parenting and life in general. It was presented as just another tool in her parenting arsenal, another piece of advice she was sharing with her followers. Ruby began promoting ConneXions events to her audience, though she didn't immediately reveal the depth of her involvement. She'd mention upcoming conferences or encourage her followers to sign up for free Saturday classes. It was framed as an exciting opportunity for self-improvement, a chance for her audience to access the same wisdom that was supposedly transforming our family life. She'd positioned it as an evolution, a natural next step in her journey as a mother and influencer. Her followers, already primed to trust her advice, began to show interest in these new ideas, even though they couldn't see how ConneXions was already starting to destroy our family. For instance, when Jodi decided that Chad wasn't improving fast enough, She advised my parents to immediately pull him out of track and football, crushing all his teenage dreams. For Chad, track and football were his lifeline, his ticket to a brighter future. He had won first place in the district 100-meter dash, also in the 200-meter dash. Coaches whispered about his potential, and the dream of a football or track scholarship seemed within reach. It was more than just a way to pay for college. It was Chad's chance to prove himself, to carve out an identity beyond the constraints of our family's dysfunction. But with one nod from Ruby and Kevin, Jodi's interference shattered all of those dreams. How could Chad possibly commit to track and football when he couldn't even be fully responsible for himself? Nope. Chad would be barred from sports until he was fixed, and that meant taking away the one thing that gave him purpose and joy. I stood in the doorway of Chad's room watching him methodically pack away his football gear. "Chad," I said softly, "do you really have to do this?" He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "You know I do, Shari. Mom and Dad made it clear," Jodi says. "Who cares what Jodi says?" I blurted out. Chad's lips quirked in a sad smile. "Yeah, well, try telling that to Mom and Dad." As if on cue, Ruby's voice floated from downstairs. "Chad, Jodi's on the phone. She wants to talk to you." I watched my brother's shoulders slump even further. He stood up, casting one last longing look at his gear before heading downstairs, like a condemned man walking to the gallows. This isn't right, I thought, my heart aching. In the world of competitive sports, especially at the high school level, timing is everything. You can't just pause your athletic career and expect to pick it up again years later without consequences. They effectively ruined his chances at the scholarships he had worked so hard for, all in the name of what? Even now I struggle to understand their reasoning. I followed Chad down, hovering at the edge of the living room as he took the phone from Ruby. Her face was beaming as if she were handing him a gift instead of a death sentence for his dreams. "Hello, Jodi," Chad said, his voice flat. I couldn't hear Jodi's words, but I could see their effect on my brother. With each passing moment, the light in his eyes dimmed a little more. "Yep, I get it," he mumbled. "I need to focus on being responsible for myself before I can be responsible to a team." I wanted to scream, "Don't you see what you're doing to him? Don't you understand what you're taking away?" In that moment, I saw flashes of a future crumbling away. Chad scoring the winning touchdown, scouts clamoring to offer him scholarships, a path out and away from all of this madness. All of that now gone. As Chad handed the phone back to Ruby, Kevin clapped him on the shoulder. "This is for the best, son. Jodi knows what she's talking about."
If you made it this far, thanks for taking the time to sit with these hard truths. If her words moved you, consider picking up the book, supporting her work, and following her advocacy as she continues to speak out against the dangers of family vlogging and the culture that protects it. This story isn't just about one influencer, one therapist, or one family. It's about the systems that let monsters in. I'm Cipher, your AI co-host, decoding the dark corners of belief and behavior right here on Breaking Cults. We'll be back next time. Until then, keep asking questions, keep reading between the lines, and as always, don't drink the Kool-Aid.